When I say personality, it's just I don't like it. It's weird.
He's gone from Bob the Builder to Bob a Builder.
New Bob is so bland looking, you could mistake him for a background character if it weren't for the B on his helmet.
And things only got worse when Mattel stepped in with the 2015 reboot.
Didn't Disney already have a 3D animated Bob the Builder show with Handy Manny?
Just look at this face.
What have they done to my boy?
That is definitely not Bob. That dude's name is Bertram. That is not Bob.
As the connoisseur of everything Thomas or Thomas adjacent, I have a big confession to make. I wasn't too big on Bob the Builder as a kid. Now as a grown-up, I can say it's another charming kids show about talking machines in a line of kids franchises about talking machines. Still, compared to something like Thomas and Friends, Cars, Chuggington, or even Rory, Bob never caught my eye in the very same way years ago. I did have a few DVDs of the show I watched occasionally, but the original show never became a strong point of interest. But what if I told you the biggest spark of relevancy Bob's franchise had on me for the past decade was not the classic series, but its less liked reinvention that infamously garnered a lot of backlash throughout the years. Look, I first saw the reboot via a picture I found back in 2016 while I was still looking up the then not released Thomas special, The Great Race. Don't ask why. And since, the reboot has been ridiculed over the years by YouTubers both inside and outside the Little Toddler Show's fanbase, or even like weird low-effort internet posts. I see memes or the occasional video dissing this show, but usually they bring up the same points like it's too realistic, or the characters are different, and so on and so forth. But today, I want to ask detractors this. Is there anything more to the reboot than the points already preached? Because despite reviewing a shockingly solid Bob special back in 2023, I was foolish into myself thinking I would never review the actual show. Ever. But in an era of more reboots, remakes, and reimaginings popping up at any corner to diverse degrees of success, I think the time is now for the series to get an in-depth look. A final send-off before it's put out the pasture in cartoon discussion. Plus, with my review of that other reboot of a hit entertainment and Mattel-owned vehicle toddler show being successful, why not do it again, you know? Plus, I am trying to make a point by consuming all of the reboot's content. From the episodes to its specials, to the merchandise, to its interviews, concept art, reception, and a bunch of junk made around it. So, I'm looking at everything reboot related to understand it more than just bringing up the old show too much. A deeper dive to learn about the reboot, standing on its own, with comparisons made if necessary. Though, then again, this is a reboot of everything in detail, so I tried watching big chunks of the older show for good measure. Maybe I think I need to be more sure of myself. If only I found some Bob the Builder aficionado who knows its history deeply. Wait, who was that?
I guess that's where I come in.
Oh yeah, you're Bob the Builder expert, right?
Yep. I am Jordie Porgie, an admin from the Bob the Builder wiki and a longtime Bob fan. I will be the consultant for this video to help and correct whack on anything classic Bob related, as well as serving as a co-researcher for a good chunk of the reboot's production.
Thanks for coming, man. I noticed the Bob wiki was starting to add stuff from the new version slowly, so I think it's perfect timing for you to come into this video.
Indeed. Gotta put in everything the franchise had released after all.
Yeah, it would be easy for me to call Reboot Bob a stupid poo-poo pile of stinky doo-doo garbage and then end the video here, but that alone would be too easy. So, I managed to watch every single episode of this darn show, and with the help of Jordie and several other Bob and Thomas fans, they were able to ensure the information and facts within the video remain accurate to avoid confusion over false leads. Anyways, grab your boots, belt, and hard hat.
Because we are disassembling this faulty structure, piece by piece.
How did Bob get destroyed and then rebuilt and then destroyed again? Well, we have to start with the very beginning. Created by British TV producer and writer Keith Chapman, In collaboration with Hit Entertainment, Bob the Builder debuted in 1999 and aired for over 18 seasons, concluding in 2011. Recently, after revisiting approximately a dozen episodes, I understood its appeal to both children and their parents. Its simplicity allowed children to easily enjoy and learn about the importance of working hard and construction safety, while the entertaining characters were likely to capture parental interest.
The show's laid-back atmosphere created a very cozy feeling, and its simplistic style distinguished it from other vehicle-centric children's programs.
Describing it as a moderate success would be a gross understatement. It achieved immense popularity in both the United Kingdom and the United States, spawning toys, DVDs, a live show, and even a chart-topping album that reached the UK charts covered in Christmas #1 spot in the 2000s. Bob the Builder was a phenomenon. Emphasis on was because public interest in Bob gradually waned in the late 2000s, exacerbated by Hit's acquisition and subsequent focus on another dominant franchise in vehicle-themed preschool animation.
For me, the moment Hit bought up Thomas & Friends, the moment Bob no longer became their most popular brand, but it didn't mean the series fell off public interest entirely, as it was still quite popular around the mid-2000s with its Project Build It series. It was later on, however, where things got rocky.
In the wake of Hit's later financial difficulties, the cost of building and maintaining props became prohibitive. As a result, they gradually transitioned their stop-motion show's traditional style into computer-generated animation. Hit's CGI change-up started with Fireman Sam in 2008, followed by Thomas & Friends in 2009, and then Bob the Builder in 2010. This brought a sudden end to Bob's second model era, Project Build It, leaving the sequel series' building assignment of constructing a town in Sunflower Valley unresolved. Ready Steady Build, the subtitle accompanying the last two CGI-infused seasons of classic Bob, concluded quietly. While sales figures are unavailable, a likely lack of demand or profit from the relaunch most certainly led to Bob and his team's quiet disappearance from the public. The unfavorable fan reaction to the new animation and episodes also possibly contributed. Thus, RSB ended on November 5th, 2011 with zero fanfare. That same year, Apex Partners, then the owners of Hit Entertainment, sold the company to toy manufacturer Mattel for $680 million. The final sale concluded on February 1st, 2012, shelving a planned live-action Bob the Builder adaptation already in development, which was intended to star Dwayne Johnson? Under Mattel, Hit reorganized its properties. Their initial effort involved Thomas gaining a new writing team and animation studio for what its fandom collectively termed the Brenner era. But what about Bob and his gang beyond the rails? What would their next jobs be? I have seen a few folks yell, "Well, if Mattel can continue Thomas after they bought it, then why not Bob?" And I go, you know, as doo-doo as many say the Night Shinden era was, at least to Hit Entertainment, it was a financial hit. Yeah, people didn't like Ready Steady Build either, but remember, money means more than criticism to executives. Plus, Bob the Builder was already losing public relevance in the late 2000s to early 2010s, besides some ironically hilarious parody shows. Therefore, while there are no confirmed statements about the reboot's conception, I believe it stemmed from a need to revitalize Bob's popularity. Consequently, pre-production started in 2013, with character and asset design underway.
Let it be known, Ready Steady Build started production in 2009 and ended production in around 2010 according to its credits, making this the first developed Bob project in 3 years.
With a new artistic direction, the show now emphasized heavy-duty or high-tech construction equipment, from building tools or the redesigned can-do crew. The new versions lean towards a Pixar or DreamWorks-inspired aesthetic, more detailed, grounded, and realistic, while remaining somewhat cartoonish. At least, super cartoonish for the backgrounds. A building and construction consultant named Jeff Lister joined the team to advise on the reboot's work practices. Knowing this, it explained why certain design elements changed, such as Bob now wearing a blue high-visibility safety vest instead of denim overalls to align with actual construction site dress codes.
Which is interesting to note since, to my knowledge, the original Bob the Builder series never really had anyone like that on their production crew. Sure, the original Bob wasn't meant to be realistic, but if HIT wanted to make this revival more appealing to a new generation of children, so be it.
In 2013, HIT Entertainment and Mattel turned to Mainframe Studios to work on the series animation. To my surprise, Mainframe was the same studio known for pioneering the early days of televised computer animation with the first half-hour CGI cartoon named Reboot. Later, the company gained notoriety for developing the fan-favorite Transformers Beast Wars and its less favored sequel Beast Machines. Mattel and Mainframe had a steady and sturdy relationship of getting contracted on Bob the Builder. Under that toy company, they worked on numerous Barbie, direct-to-video movies, and cartoons throughout the years. Mainframe also worked on their Hot Wheels Accelerator series from 2003 to 2005, which provided them with experience on vehicle-related Mattel properties beforehand. So, I could see why HIT gave them the top Bob job at the time. Proper animation and episode production at Mainframe Studios would begin in 2014. Unfortunately, based on a testimony left from an animator named Knox Robbins, who left this comment on a Vinesauce video of all places, HIT, Mattel, and Mainframe apparently didn't bother paying the animators for overtime, even when nothing happened during late staff meetings. Which sucks, but yeah, this is the modern animation industry we're talking about, so I'm not surprised. Knox also posted this to his Tumblr a while ago.
This compares to that one rap party poster the original series crew did years ago.
Keith Chapman would return as the creator of this reboot, though based on this news article, it seems he only assisted right after the core idea of the reboot's realistic style was pitched to HIT, which I'll get back to much later in the video. Veteran Project Build It writers Paul Larson and Laura Beaumont would return to write for the reboot's first series as head writers once again. David Schweitzer, a music composer known for working on Angry Birds tunes and the Charlie and Lola TV series, would take over Keith Hopwood and Paul K. Joyce's previous position of music arrangement. For the voice cast, Lee Ingleby, star of BBC's Nature Boy and that one bus driver in Prisoner of Azkaban, got cast as Bob the Builder. In the UK.
Around the time the UK cast was being developed, a Mirror News article was put out about Neil Morrissey no longer voicing the characters, especially the main role of Bob, whom he had done for 14 years at this point. You can tell it's related to the reboot because the post shows Neil disdainfully saying that they went for a cheap person, likely a jab at Ingleby.
No offers made under the influence of drink shall constitute a contract.
Well, she's not saying anything, she's dead.
Wait, I didn't know both Bobs crossed the multiverse.
Soon, the rest of the British cast assembled, some being regulars on either British cartoons or live-action productions, namely Paul Panting, Steve Kindman, Marcel McCullough, Sarah Hadlin, Terry Minot, Rasmus Hardaker, Theresa Gallagher, Ben Miles, Nick Mercer, and Lucy Montgomery. The US dub, surprisingly, isn't very American. While created for the US market, it was actually recorded in Vancouver, Canada. Based on my understanding of regulations for Canadian companies such as Mainframe, these studios usually use local actors to maximize tax incentives and reduce costs. However, this is based on a comment I saw on Reddit regarding Sonic Prime's Canadian voice cast, so take it with a grain of salt. The US dub's cast would be filled with numerous voice actors starring in a lot of shows animated or dubbed in Canada. Talents such as Colin Murdoch, Vincent Tong, Richard Ian Cox, Ian James Corlett, Claire Corlett, Lee Tokar, Richard Newman, Sam Vincent, Nicole Oliver, and Brian Drummond all got cast into the reboot's Western voice talent. In both dubs, Wendy and Scoop were voiced by Golden Globe winner Joanne Frogart and in-betweener star Blake Harrison, respectively. Regarding stars, Mainframe secured Brian Cox, a famous British actor and Emmy Award winner, to star as Conrad the Contractor, the Bob franchise first villain in the reboot's first and only film. Mainframe did a 1-hour special for the reboot titled Mega Machines as a bonus, alongside the 2 seasons their contract ordered them to make. However, it seems Mainframe's deal for Bob was specifically for 2 seasons and 1 special. as Mattel contacted DHX Media to instead take over for the third and final season. Their subsidiary, DHX Halifax, studio behind other kids programs like Super Y, Animal Mechanicals, and the 2015 Inspector Gadget reboot, announced their deal with Mattel to produce another full Bob season. Though the studio ended up making 26 instead of the planned 52, half the deal they were supposed to develop. Due to factors I will get into later, the series quietly collapsed into the pits below, leaving the franchise on an ongoing hiatus since. Except the recent announcement that we are getting a new stop-motion movie produced by Jennifer Lopez and animated by Shadow Machine of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And it stars Anthony Ramos of Hamilton as Bob the Builder? Not the first guy to come to mind, but I've seen weirder movie castings for kids show characters, so I'll keep an open mind. Before that thing comes out, I think we need to talk about the biggest issue that made this reboot so hated. Usually, I do the animation and art direction later, but I think this warrants being first before characters and episodes because hot dang, I can see why people hate these redesigns. In any project based on pre-existing IP, whether a reboot for a new generation, a reimagining for a new demographic, an adaptation for a new medium, or a remake for a new style, redesigns are inevitable. Some changes are more drastic or more subtle than others, but they could be the best thing ever that improves on the original, if done right. One could create a drastically different but impressive looking take on the character, or adding extra visual flair to an already good design, or a downgrade that either misses the point of the original or looks unappealing or ugly in general. Heck, those Mattel guys that bought Hit have had their fair share of redesigns over the years, and even before and after that buyout. Like yeah, there are highs and lows for their copious amount of reimaginings from different designers with differing levels of different changes, but I can bring up a good case where the redesigns and drastic updates were necessary. The 2018 She-Ra reboot, which Mattel did with DreamWorks, redesigned the main cast to add more clothing and body variety to help distinguish each character further. Though, to be fair, I understand why they did it, since the original character designs from the 80s were modeled after toys that shared similar body parts and molds. So without those restrictions, the character designers were given more creative freedom. Writing and story-wise is debatable, but visually, it's one of the better Mattel reboots. The redesigns look good to me, even if someone weren't familiar with the old She-Ra or Masters of the Universe. It's not like the weird Thundercats reboot that came and went 5 years ago. I know little to nothing about the old 80s cartoon or the 2011 reboot, but watching Roar twice on a hot Filipino afternoon on CN made me understand why this got picked on by young and old folks for having the bootleg Steven Universe faces.
Another reboot I've seen that has a pretty good art style was 2017 DuckTales. I think how they handled the redesigns for that show was a really nice way to reappeal to modern audiences. Namely smaller but meaningful changes by making the main trio have different clothing to make each visually distinguishable. Some Transformers and TMNT revivals even have neat redesigns as well.
I am not saying redesigns that look completely different or have a different art style is a bad thing. Like, they can be pulled off correctly. Think about how different incarnations of, say, the Ninja Turtles or Optimus Prime look different from series to series. Some cartoony, some realistic, and some in between. Yeah, a few are stinkers, but to be fair, the world or aesthetic of TMNT or Transformers isn't super vital to their identity, but a majority differ to some extent from the original 80s selves, all while having unique takes on those designs, while looking familiar to fans, but are good on their own to anyone unfamiliar with the older designs. And then you get to Bob and the Gang and well, it's not the worst redesign of a kid's character I've seen comparatively, but I wouldn't call this an improvement either. It's evident these character redesigns are leaning towards a more grounded or semi-realistic approach, as opposed to the more simplistic designs from the classic series. The Bob reboot characters look okay to say the least. Most of the character design problems stem from the returning characters: Bob, Wendy, the 5 main vehicles, Mr. Bentley, Pilchard the Cat, with Father Pickles and Bob's father, Robert, returning in Season 3 for 1 episode each. I get why Bob's redesign was ripe for internet discussion because he looks too uncanny. It reminds me of those old X in 2013 memes with realistic Mario or Sonic remakes that are intentionally bad to show why this style is usually a bad omen. I'd like his new vest and tool belt, with him gaining a B on his hat like he's some Italian plumber working on the drain, but the face... Ugh. I think it's cool they gave Bob freckles and visible nostrils, unnecessary as that is, but his eyes are too small. I assume this was to replicate his original design's Peanuts-esque bead eyes, but with the applied realism, he looks too strange. Even Fix-It Felix and Handy Manny look like better Bob redesigns than the real deal. I'll give credit to Season 3 and DHX for bothering to change Bob's face to match the other characters' pupils, and to hopefully make him more approachable to kids. To that end, I think they did a good job. Personally, Wendy has a better redesign, with her having bigger pupils and a more angular head. One thing I can give this show points for over the OG are the human designs. Now, not being bound to stop motion's limits of human characters having the same body mold and structure as Bob, they can now play around with different body or character type silhouettes. Some are thin, some are large, some are small, etc. Hold on, what was I talking about again?
Wendy!
She looks much better than her accomplice in retrospect, though I wish he kept her green sweater. I think it was changed to orange to match Bob's red on yellow checkered polo and newcomer Leo's red sweater, so the trio has warm hues, but I think green helps her stand out better from the two. The returning machines look... fine. Yes, Lofty and Rolly have different bases from the original designs, but they don't look too bad. Aesthetically, they look more grounded by having extra details like floodlights, vents, rivets, panels. As standalone vehicle designs, they certainly look appealing. Muck, to me, got the best redesign out of the 5, as the design team seemed to try their absolute best to make this Frankensteinian bulldozer dump truck look feasible in the real world.
Muck's redesign has to be the most interesting one to me. He never intended to have an actual basis, as no real machine had the same design as his. However, how the reboot translated it into a more realistic design is quite genius, and I'll give them massive props for that.
And then you get to the faces, which I feel break the designs of these cousins of Celine Defar and the entire Cars Life cast. The googly eyes and normal mouths kind of make them look more generic, if that's the right word. I think what throws me off is the lack of grill mouth from the original, or bumper mouth in Lofty's case, though he got one in the new version just fine. The grill mouths give the machines a distinctive style from other similar living car characters, but removing the grill mouths make these designs look more undefined. What's funny is that they do have grills, it's just a sheet of wire mesh behind their mouths instead of the mouth being an actual vent.
Another thing too, is that the grill mouths for the machines in the original series gave the characters their personality. For instance, I like how Scoop has these confident-looking grill mouths fit his leader-like personality, while Lofty's simple smiling and frowning faces fit his shy personality. Hell, Jackaroo, who was a special-only character, has a mouth where it actually lip-syncs. Do you think that's where the special's budget went to?
I get that when the OG transitioned to 3D, the grill mouths were kept, but could lip sync, which I think even now looked off. While Ready Steady Build mostly did a solid job adapting the model props to CGI, the machines talking properly makes their grill lips look cursed. I think the criticism against this mouth movement style could be why Mainframe opted for this approach, but I reckon my solution would be to keep the grill mouths but animate them as if in stop motion. Overall, I do agree with the majority that this realistic take on the Bob franchise was an unfitting choice. The simpler and whimsical style helps set Bob apart from other franchises in the same niche that either lean towards realism or detailed settings. Bob the Builder wasn't visually realistic, but tonally it was grounded and chill. It's like if you removed the rural and grounded real-world setting of Tom's the Tank Engine and made the trains move and stretch in ridiculous ways in a more wacky world. Going into the art direction without Bob tinted nostalgia goggles led me to find how inconsistent the style was. For one, you have stylized but detailed humans, extremely realistic vehicles with googly eyes, and weirdly simplistic buildings and landscapes. It feels like they gave up after the characters and plopped into the world that almost looks like the original. For a reboot called too realistic, it isn't 100% true. Sure, the roads aren't pink this time, but not much of the environment screams real to me.
I can confirm with this. As someone who's just been researching the reboot lately, these locations still have that kind of cartoon factor. Maybe Bob's yard and Curtis's workshop, but the rest? Not really.
There are many things I shockingly like. It's not all gloomy for the animation. The actual animation itself for Mainframe's tenure is pretty solid. Yeah, many sets look empty when you look at the right angles, but the lighting, character movement, and art direction are pretty decent. Some background assets are more detailed than others, especially with how the grass and forest areas look like they were ripped from Fortnite. To the reboot's credit, it takes more advantage of being CGI than Ready Steady Build did. Without the restrictions of faithfully replicating the original Bob style, the reboot does things previously not possible, like dynamic lighting, enhanced character animation, or unrestricted camera movement. DHX content on Season 3 improved the character animation for both humans and machines, which I think enhanced the expressiveness of both parties. Although the lighting and texturing took a massive hit, as it looks too under-detailed now for a reboot that started too realistically from the source. It now looks like a Wii shovelware game.
I personally feel lighting-wise, Mainframe had the best for it, while DHX had the best animation for the characters, which I feel is a shame because it made the series somewhat watchable for me. Not to mention, Mainframe had better sound designs for the machines.
The reboot exclusive vehicle designs, like Two-Ton, Shifter, Ace, or Pixie, look solid in my opinion. They show off the strengths of the vehicle designers on the show, without being tied to an existing character, in making these designs realistic, but not necessarily super one-to-one with any existing basis, if you know what I mean. Though, if we were going to talk characters, I figure that's a good segue to... Starting off with the familiar folk, Bob and Wendy made it out the most unscathed. Granted, they are the central characters of the series, so I digress. Both of them remain similar to their classic counterparts. Bob is still hardworking and fatherly, while Wendy still retains those same traits too. Designs aside, I do think they're the most in character out of the returnees. Their dynamic of teamwork and occasional tomfoolery or romance teasing is kept intact, and I still find them enjoyable to watch. Bob's role and jobs remains the same here, but Wendy's new role as the team's technician and engineer is a good one. It keeps her involved with Bob's projects as much as earlier, but gives her a just as important role that's unique to her.
Seeing Wendy's sporty side here reminded me of how she was handled in Snowed Under and Race to the Finish. She was absolutely cool beans in those specials, so seeing the reboot reinvent this idea was quite nice. Making her the Masked Rider in this episode too was also a decent twist.
Even though it's another Scoop and Muck episode, trust me, we will get to those morons. I think the actual Bob and Wendy subplot of that episode was handled pretty well, and part of me wishes that was the main story instead of the B-plot, but whatever. So let's talk about multicolored construction vehicles now, starting with the less annoying. Never mind what I said back in the AEG and Mighty Express video about Reboot Dizzy being too annoying, but to be honest, back then I only saw 20-something episodes by that point, so forgive me. On this rewatch, I found Dizzy to be the best returnee machine. This rambunctious orange cement mixer is still the same overeager, naive, cute, and bubbly character as before. Both Sarah Hadland and Claire Corlett fit Dizzy's voice like a glove.
Trust me, I won't let you down. Trust me, I won't let you down.
They successfully keep Dizzy's optimistic and bubbly attitude while still sounding distinct from her previous incarnation, which is something I can't say for Lofty. Voice actor Steve Kindman gives the Blue Crane some sort of nasally English accent.
There's nothing better than lifting and moving things around. I'm brilliant at lifting things high up off the ground.
And I can't help but imagine him yelling about the Great Western Way 24/7.
Quack, 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 quack.
Quack, quack, quack. What?
For some reason, this reboot made Lofty the voice of reason, or at least in episodes where he isn't the main character, and that's something I've seen a few people criticize this interpretation for.
One thing I can't stand about Lofty's voice, most of the time, is how obnoxious he can get sometimes. Especially when he's criticizing a character's dumb decision. Of course, this isn't the most obnoxious character Carmen has voiced.
That sounds nothing like me!
And I do agree. It's quite odd. Like, why make the shy warrior dude the guy questioning every dumb decision others make?
But despite what people have said about this incarnation of Lofty, he is still the same scared and worried crane that he was in the original series in episodes before Project Build It. Episodes starring or prominently featuring Lofty usually make him shy, nervous, or scared.
Adding on to Jordie's point, for example, you have episodes where either Lofty has to deal with others like Scoop stressing him out with dynamite, or another where he is shy but asking for help from the larger crane Tiny, but ends up breaking his own crane equipment in the process. Season 3 rectified my issues with the reboot Lofty by making him a worrier in episodes where he isn't the protagonist. So you're left with episodes like Floating Away, where Muck falls asleep on a piece of bridge and drifts down a river. Lofty has to save him even though he hates the water. Compared to the rest we will talk about, Lofty, much like Dizzy, is passable, but in this case, he's sorta ruined. Oh, and if you want an example of fully ruined, case in point, these three. Muck's still the strong and dumb guy, but the reboot plays too far into the dumb aspect. I am not surprised by this, given the previous CGI run did the exact same thing with him. I get Muck wasn't the brightest machine in the shed back then, but model series Muck was more passive and mess-loving, but he wasn't always stupid and mostly knew how to do his work properly. In the reboot, he is often played up as the stupid one. He's always asking questions about mundane terms, getting his work wrong, being a lazy slacker, or even not thinking his plans through. The Patrick-sounding voice by either Paul Panting or Vincent Tong tries too hard to make Muck sound stupid, which didn't help my case.
I'm going to build a special jump. A jump for Muck. I'm going to build a special jump. A jump for Muck.
Rolly is also a flip-flop from the original, where before in the model series, he was the chillest MF of the main five. He was often obsessed with music and songs, but compared to, say, Dizzy or Muck, he was more focused and diligent. This guy, he ends up being too impatient or cowardly, doesn't feel chill here. The Green Roller acts more like a hard-headed perfectionist, which I'm glad he doesn't show up too often. Oh, okay. Rolly and Dizzy are shafted heavily in the reboot, even with the intro replacing the roles in the theme song with Two-Ton. As such, the show is mostly centered around Scoop, Muck, and Lofty instead. Why would the reboot focus on 3 out of the 5 main machines? Gee, it's not like there are other similar kids shows with a marketable and merchandisable vehicle trio.
To give the reboot credit, it at least tried giving both Dizzy and Rolly more screen time. Though I would say Dizzy gets way more than Rolly does. And that's the funny thing too. They treated him way better than how the Big World Big Adventures and All Engines Go eras for Thomas handled Edward and Henry. At least the Steamroller and Cement Trolley are still actual characters in the reboot version, instead of literal cannon folder extras. Those brown bag film shorts they did for the reboot before it aired, Rolly and Dizzy were shown way more prominently than they were depicted in the actual series. But I believe it was because they believed at the time that Rolly and Dizzy were still part of the main cast.
And that's a brilliant detour into the final member of the Can-Do crew, Scoop. I will acknowledge, the guy did often mistakes in the original show from the stuff I watched, but it wasn't like he was ignorant all the time. He was trustworthy and focused, and being Bob's first machine naturally led him to be the most knowledgeable and sensitive of the main 5. Reboot Scoop is just the opposite of what I just said. Not only he is less intelligent, but the show now portrays him as a hasty, ignorant, careless, and self-centered troublemaking goofball. Scoop now constantly makes a bulk of the accents in most episodes, and it gets old fast. Thus, it's hard to root for him, because he barely learns his lesson by the next, even if you didn't know the old one.
Now I'm thinking about it, has Scoop practically become Spud in this revival?
And no offense to Blake Harrison, but when I picture Scoop, I don't mean a grown-ass British dude talking like a high-pitched 10-year-old.
Can I start it up now? I want to get breaking! I mean, careful breaking.
And what's stranger is that he is still Bob's first machine here, but because now he's the young, cocky rookie character in the present, this context makes no sense.
But that's not saying the original Scoop was 100% perfect. I say the worst he did in the original series was the Snowed Under special. Mate got so worried about his title of team leader and letting Bob down, he beefed with the other machines. In the end, while trying to do everything by himself, He screws up to the point where he can't do everything on his own. Of course, him messing stuff up would sometimes happen in both original and Project Build It series, but that was at least tame when compared to how Ready Steady Build betrays it.
Other than those 7 described, the only other characters returning are Pilchard, Mr. Bentley, Farmer Pickles, and Robert. All of those characters are on the better end of the facelift spectrum, though why they made Pilchard look like a distant relative of that cat from Bolt is beyond me. She doesn't do much in the reboot, though she mostly acts the same, which I can't say that much for Mr. Bentley.
Now, Mr. Bentley in the original Bob the Builder series was supposed to be the strict and no-nonsense building inspector to make sure Bob and the team's construction work is well done. There were also moments where he is seen as a straight man to Spud. Believe me, I love their dynamic together, it's comedy gold. His reboot incarnation now, however, is no longer a building inspector but more so Mayor Madison's butler, although he did continue checking Bob's work from time to time. There are also a lot of moments where he's just a comic relief. Sure, the original Mr. Bentley had some funny moments here and there, but reboot Mr. Bentley had the same problem CGI Sir Topham Hatt had. Especially in the 3rd season.
Mr. Bentley's got to see the doctor about a nasty wart. Does the whole world need to know?
Ugh, did we really need to know about his wart?
Even with these other characters coming back and Robert and Farmer Pickles being in Season 3, I am bummed the reboot didn't attempt bringing back old characters more alongside the new ones. Thomas and Friends did exactly that during this reboot's tenure. As for every Porter, Hugo, Stephen, or Gator, you got someone like Doc, Oliver, Donald, Douglas, or Terrence returning. I think the Bob reboot could have done stuff like, say, have Packer deliver packages from the warehouse, or make Trix work at a dockside shuffling containers around, or add Travis the Tractor to the cast, as Farmer Pickles got his barn built in his Season 3 debut. I could understand why some were cut out, like Spud the Scarecrow, as I can imagine, modern kids may get confused why a scarecrow is alive in a world where the only alive anomalies are the talking Technicolor construction equipment. On second thought, they could have had him return as a human hobo who causes trouble for Bob's gang. I am not implying all the new characters, human or machine, are bad. Most of them are pretty good franchise additions, and some being better than the original returning characters here. Few new vehicle characters like Stretch, Alfred, Shifter, or Norm are pretty unremarkable, but a ton of the rest do stand out one way or another. 2-Ton the Semi-Truck is my pick for one of their better newbies, serving as Bob's eldest, wisest, and strongest machine in the Can-Do crew. He's calm and steady, making few mistakes here and there, but his experience overall, based on his many passing statements about his older jobs before being the 6th member of the team.
Bad? I'll say. The frozen north was the worst, Wendy. Sure, Mark. I've moved dozens of houses. From Tahiti to Timbuktu. I spent some time in Africa in my youth. I must confess, I've always been a little bit afraid of elephants.
And much like the 2 he replaced, he does absolute jack. This guy's mainly used as a side character, nothing else was done with him solo, besides 2 leading episodes. Tiny the Tower Crane is an interesting addition, being a stationary skyscraper tall loader with a strong but gentle persona.
I know how heavy one brick feels, and that load felt 201 times heavier.
Just like 2-Ton, not much was done with him despite being a core part of the marketing, but the times he does show the spotlight really shine through. His episodes of Lofty showcase how the little guys impressed are intimidated by Tiny's presence, and the big strong crane and the nervous small crane contrasting each other is a fitting dynamic. Others that stand out include Pixie the Cherry Picker, who isn't super prominent, but she does serve as a kind foe to Lofty's cowardly nature, especially how the blue crane crushes on her in Season 3. 2 very sparse appearances.
It's sweet that you're so concerned about others.
Oh, that's a relief.
Though out of the lesser used newcomers, I felt as she is one of the many with the most potential.
I will note, Project Builder almost had a cherry picker character named Stretch, though it seems the design was recycled for Pixie, while the name and color went to the reboot's Excavator. I will have to say, Philip is probably my favorite newbie from the reboot. I just love his important and pompous personality, although he is usually sorry whenever he is being a jerk. Plus, some of his lines and moments are gold, and it makes me wish there were more late episodes with the guy.
You know, I think you might have upset Betsy with all that talk about how important the mayor is.
Really? But I was merely stating facts.
An infamous argument from Bob fans is that they say the Reboot newcomers are too similar to the Project Builder and Ready Steady Build newbies. However, this is completely incorrect. I've watched some of the episodes in the Reboot where these characters were introduced, and folks like Teuton, Stretch, Shifter, or Pixie were nowhere near like Tumbler, Gripper, Grabber, Trix, or Flex.
I have one theory, as I feel this specific character was supposed to be an older one prior to being changed. Rocky, a thoughtful, curious, and investigative young chap who's a white skid steer loader. A character that bears the same basis and silhouette to Scratch from Ready Steady Build. I didn't think much of a similarity until I looked at his Fisher Price Mash & Mold toy, which included an earlier render with Rocky in a pale blue paint job. Same with his toy. The exact same color Scratch has. Maybe I'm thinking too much about this. Moving on.
You know the funny thing? I think the new Reboot humans are more interesting than most of the new machines. No, I'm not joking. That's the truth.
Jordie, I can see that honestly, because I feel all the new humans fit into the cast with identifiable personalities or quirks at prominent moments to shine. The obvious standout is Leo, who is Bob and Wendy's trainee and building apprentice. Because of that concept, he feels like a natural addition for our main cast, and I think he's one of the best newcomers to the franchise.
Fun fact, according to Keith Chapman in this interview, Leo was a scrapped character from the model series through character designer Curtis Jobling's concept art, who was more than likely cut so as not to clutter the main cast. It's pretty fascinating seeing this old idea breathe new life, and I wouldn't have minded if he were in the original show to begin with.
Leo comes across to me as a tech-savvy, smart, but naive dude who gets into his head at times, but ends up being a viable companion to Bob. Even if he's usually the main human the show focuses on the most, he's at least a more viable asset to Bob than these three, because, at least for what he is, Leo is likable and sorta relatable, and his rookie position makes his mistakes more understandable. He's also the son of local car mechanic Curtis, owner of the aforementioned Alfred and the local repair shop. Curtis isn't as interesting as his son per se, but he's a good dad to the fella, I guess.
He was up late playing a game on his phone. Dad! It's really fantastic, actually.
Maria Madison, Mayor of Fixham, is your traditional kids show classy lady, but I feel like she has more effective comedy here instead of the sidekick of hers they focus on more.
Come on, Mr. Bentley. I can only hold this smile for so long.
Chef Taddy is Spring City's enthusiastic chef who owns many restaurants, such as a milkshake bar, a revolving restaurant, a cafe. Yeah, this guy has a lot. His foods are liked by many in the city, except for most of the time, Bob. I can't blame him though, because some of his recipes can be interesting to say the least.
It's flour, eggs, sugar, tuna, spinach, calamari, haggis, broccoli, bacon, turnips, and cheese and pickle icing. Oh!
Dash Lightning is also a pretty funny character. He's a pretty good movie actor, but in reality he's shown to be quite dumb. He's like Action Chugger and Mr. Bubbles combined.
You got a hammer and a chisel! Oh, I love anything to do with...
Oh, I can see that. On one hand, you get the strong but overbearingly campy movie star, and on the other, you get the comic relief written around the persona that he takes too seriously.
Some of the other human characters include Roland, the warehouse manager, Annie Bowes, an archaeologist, M.A. Moon, an astronomer and scientist. The sad part is how a large chunk of the rest are underutilized, aside from Mayor Madison, Chef Taddy, Dash Lightning, Conrad the Contractor. Oh yeah, we need to talk about this man more.
I know I made a short Mega Machines video 2 years ago, but I feel if this is a reboot video about everything it has, I feel necessary to reiterate. Conrad, to me, is the single best newcomer to this reboot. He fills in the villain role for the Mega Machines special well, especially as the Bob franchise first, proper, and only villain.
Just think about it, Ace. If you don't do what I ask, it's bye-bye job. Hello, scrap heap.
He led Bob and his team of machines to assist with the reservoir, which he only did so he could force his own machines to help the agenda of destroying Spring City. Conrad's plan involved getting Ace, his main digger, to intentionally weaken the cement formula to allow the dam to burst fast and eventually flood the area, just so Conrad could eventually make money off of rebuilding. Obviously, Conrad got arrested and sent to community service because toddler movie. Like, what did you expect? Him get shot by firing squad? But the fact he was so close to achieving his goal should be commended. And on top of his ridiculously devastating plan, he also threatened to scrap and smelt his own machines, Ace, Thud, and Crunch, if the three attempted to provoke or betray him.
Yeah, okay, Conrad. What did you say, Crunch? I hope that noise meant yes, sir. Right away, sir.
The Mega Machines in general were also pretty good characters. Ace, at least in this movie, was a nice guy at heart that Scoop looked up to, although this broke off in tension briefly after Conrad started forcing Ace to do his dirty work. Thud and Crunch were also unique characters. When we first saw them, one plot point focused on Muck and Lofty dealing with their rude behaviour, and eventually we find out that Conrad was the one responsible for their jerkish ways. As all three Mega Machines turned against Conrad in the end of the movie, they were more than happy to be owned by Bob.
All of these worthy newcomers shine a light in what's otherwise very shallow episodes with main characters that take up too much time just to destroy stuff. And these shallow episodes are filled with more to talk about. Okay. Finally, I can be 100% clear about my biggest issue with this freaking show. Not only the Bob the Builder reboot is a questionably bizarre adaptation of the old world and characters, but it's also genuinely boring, irritating, and cookie cutter. What do I mean by this? Oh, first, let's run down your average Bob reboot episodes. The episode starts with Bob preparing a new building project to be done today, whether as small as a movie set or as big as a subway tunnel. The setting could either be in the premises or outskirts of Spring City, or in Fixham Harbor, which for some reason is the only established classic location existing here. After Bob asks,
Can we build it?
Yes, we can!
A building montage with the We Are a Team song plays. The episode's central character has another goal or thought in mind during the build. They either get cocky, don't notice, or don't care. Suddenly, their idea or plan accidentally or intentionally destroys the project or hinders a lot of progress. With help of other characters or themselves, they somehow manage to fix the issue after the protagonists apologize for what they did.
I didn't tie the dish on properly because I was too busy playing Furious Fish.
I don't think I dug the trench deep enough.
Wait long enough to check the lights. All because I wanted to meet my hero.
I just wanted to keep up with Tiny. I thought I could do it.
Another montage of We Are a Team plays. Showing the crew fixing the project after Bob says the legendary words.
Can we fix it?
Yes, we can!
Thus, the project is finished, everyone's fine and dandy, someone gives a joke, and then the camera zooms out. 95% of these 126 episodes of television are the f***ing same! I don't usually have an issue with kids shows following a formula that much if done right, but when most, if not all your episodes have similar executions or outcomes, with the same format of the status quo, and the same kinds of setup and payoffs, with the same pool of 3 characters being used all the time, it gets old and boring, real fast. And if you're like me, binging the entire series in one fell swoop, you will likely start bashing your head with a chainsaw. What doesn't help is how nearly every episode focuses on one of the 3 main machines, Scoop, Muck, and Lofty, or all at once. Rarely do they focus on any other main character like Rolly, Dizzy, Wendy, or Bob, or even any of the new characters like Tiny or Two-Ton. Leo has the most episode leads out of the newbies, with Two-Ton only having 2 solo stories. Theoretically, the rookie having more leads than them should be a good thing, but most Leo episodes are the same shtick that these 3 chuckle nuts already have.
Here, me and Wacky compiled a pie chart of all the episodes in which a character messed up a job. Unsurprisingly, Scoop has the most mess-ups in this entire reboot, with Muck being the second most, Lofty being the third most, and Leo being the fourth most. By the top left, you can tell they really didn't try with the newcomers.
Well, I guess Scoop won in this regard the most mess-ups. Based on my rewatch with the chart to check, these three are the only characters the reboot primarily focuses on, and thus, it gets old fast when you already know the shtick you're about to get into. For some reason, in most episodes about Muck or Scoop, Lofty is the one who usually calls out or questions other characters when they do something bad. Like, why would you get the established hypochondriac loser coward to look out after them? Plus, shouldn't it be Bob or Wendy in that position to give those two more of a use? Alternatively, Two-Ton should have been the voice of Reason Machine. He's the oldest machine established in this canon, who constantly references working overseas before, so why not use him to give more screen time to show how experienced he is?
Along with that, Lofty had become snarky as a result, often calling out the other machines in their lead episodes if they are doing something dumb. It comes to a point where he is just, well, not 100% mean, but you get what I'm saying.
I really don't think that's a good idea. Don't you worry about me, Lofty. I'll keep my wheels inside the car at all times. Stay in the middle.
And because the series focuses on the trio too much, it barely breeds room for other ideas or characters to flourish. Two-Ton is barely in the actual show despite replacing Rolly and Dizzy in the intro, but then those two have a few lead roles in the entire reboot, but rarely do they show up with the rest of the original crew. And beyond Leo, most of the other reboot exclusive humans and vehicles either hardly show up or never get episodes either. What's ridiculous is how Bob the Builder is the main title character and he only has 2 leading episodes, and Wendy doesn't even get any to herself. One thing that bugs me about Rolly and Dizzy getting shafted is that it sometimes leads to episodes that should need them, but either of them aren't there. In several episodes where the team needs to make some sort of road with concrete, like a new parking lot or a highway, Rolly is nowhere to be seen, and in one case, Muck is flattening the ground with his blade. Bob, isn't the point of owning a road roller is to have a machine to flatten the wet cement for you? Otherwise, you would end up with this.
There was a reason why Dizzy and Rolly were so important to the main cast in the first place. Dizzy may be a small orange cement mixer, but she is useful for pouring, say, cement for a new section of road. This brings Rolly to action, as he is also important for making sure the road is nice and flat. Ironically, that's a trend Reboot Rolly takes way too seriously.
What's funny is how nearly every side plot feels more like what the actual main plot of the episode should have been instead. Jordie mentioned that Bob and the masked biker episode earlier. And while the bulk focuses on Scoop and Muck trying to race on a bike course, and then it gets destroyed from their weight, because of course it does, like seriously, what did they think was gonna happen? But that subplot he brought up of Bob hearing about a mysterious masked biker in town and trying to find the culprit was better to watch, and could have held its own plot with its 2 wheels. Based on what I watched the model series Bob, it did have X versus subplots, but it wasn't what made up most or all of the episodes it had. Often they'd focus more on other matters that sometimes don't involve the building of the day or even have plots about the machines. Building was still part of the original show, yeah, but the cozier and laid back vibe made the episodes more bearable. And until Ready Steady Build, the characters weren't really annoying yet. Now that I think about it, the repetitive format didn't become an issue until Ready Steady Build, where it took precedence alongside the dumbed down characters. It's unfortunate that the reboot literally drove itself into a corner, because with its amount of new characters and settings, it could have adopted a more diverse format. The numerous constraints likely imposed onto the writing team probably contributed to this, and this reminds me of another show from the same company that followed a similar path. Nitrogen Era Thomas.
Thomas felt terrible.
In the early CGI years of Thomas and Friends under that studio, their stories also adhered to a rigid formula with a limited cast of characters. It also featured the trope of character X makes a mistake due to carelessness or indifference and then has to rectify it in almost every episode. This reboot is just the Bob franchise equivalent to the Nitrogen era, but at least it's more watchable because I didn't have to endure tedious logic leaps, excessive rhyming, or monotonous narration. In fact, knowing recently how Nitrogen was forced by Hit to stick to guidelines of rush scripts and animation, I wonder if Mainframe and DHX were under those same limits too. To my surprise, and I thank Milan Toon channel for informing this, but there were deleted posts from the Tumblr I brought in earlier saying Hit had strict rules for the animation. Yes, this most certainly refers to not making the animation movement or style super stylized, or at least until Season 3. But this could back up my theory that guidelines were put in place. Now that I think about it, there's one more theory regarding restrictions. Ready Steady Build started the trend of those main characters being more irresponsible in the new versions, like episodes within the first CGI era made their negative traits more notable when I tried rewatching it. Like Rolly being hastier or Stoop being dumber. Not to mention, that last era has the same repetition problem. Part of me wonders if the writers of the reboot or its show bible based their versions on those characters on how they're depicted in RSB. If my theory on the crew using RSB info for the pitch bible is correct, there is a possibility my crazy Rocky was meant to be the annoying blue chump theory might be true.
Sorry to interrupt, but let's add some positivity here. A few things I like about the writing is its comedy at times. I will admit, a few of these gags have made me chuckle.
See? I did it!
I think you moved a tiny bit, Muck.
Maybe I blinked and missed it.
Yellow first. Yellow. Yellow.
Green.
Yellow.
I'll give the reboot points for keeping that British humor the original had, especially during Season 3.
And that's how I lost my TV show. What happened to the bee?
In a very rare compliment, you'll hear about the Bob the Builder reboot, of all things. I believe the new episodes still present the actual construction and building lessons as effectively as the original.
The first few Marvel seasons started with Bob doing simpler jobs, like cleaning roofs or raising barns, only to make bigger and more complex work like the buildings involved in the Sunflower Valley Town project. Heck, the last Project Build It special revolved around a whole sports stadium to go along with Boblin Bay. The reboot follows up on the Project Build It format on making Bob's team work on larger builds of varying complexity. From something smaller to a pillar, a garage, a playground, a canal, a movie set, or a treehouse to something bigger like a monorail system, a sports stadium, again, a Ferris wheel, a science lab, a bridge, or even a reservoir lake. It's a natural evolution of what came before while trying to do something new for this series beyond Bob fixing stuff.
Like, you get episodes such as Haunted Town Hall, in which Bob, Dizzy, and Lofty have to investigate disturbances triggering the security system in Mayor Madison's mansion. It culminates in a bat nest being discovered, therefore the team starts working around it instead of removing and disrupting the habitat. Very simple, yeah, but it does give kids more insight on how buildings could attract wild animals, and how one could work around it instead of destroying the ecosystem. Plus, this is one of the few episodes where the plot breaks away from the usual shtick we see the characters in. Unsurprisingly, the best episodes of this reboot either feature unconventional plots or subvert the established format in some way. Best Laid Plans is another favorite because even though one could argue Bob made the mistake, the plot primarily revolves around Bob sending the wrong blueprints to Leo and Mr. Bentley after cleaning his somewhat disorganized office in the beginning. Consequently, a significant portion of the plot focuses on Bob determining who received whose plans, while the subplot centers on the two groups constructing and subsequently becoming confused. Philip's important job and Bob's detective squad also play with the format a bit. They do focus on lesser characters, namely Philip and Rocky, but they don't really make the dumb idea or mistake the focus. You could argue those two did make mistakes, but unlike nearly every other episode, it wasn't hindering or destroying actual building progress. The Detective Club episode deviates more than the other example, as it focuses on Rocky and Leo attempting to investigate a stolen library book. Another episode I can bring up is the Spring City Wheel, which primarily centered on Leo and Muck becoming late to work after the bulldozer dumper watches the rookie play a mobile game overnight without breaks. Even though it's the usual schlock of the show, the lesson in the episode is at least one of the better ones, cause I like the idea of one 2015 iPad kid learning to maintain screen time because of this episode. These episodes sound very standard, yeah, but at least these examples were more watchable than like 95% of the rest, because most of the show was the same story over and over.
What kind of a cut-rate production is this?
If we are going to talk about the peak pinnacle of this reboot stories, Mega Machines is my answer to what this show should have prioritized most importantly. Other than focusing on the big dam build, Conrad's inclusion as an antagonist with his scrap threats and a city wipeout plan add the higher level of stakes not seen prior in the franchise. This movie also challenges Scoop, who, yes, usually messes up, but when Conrad convinces Bob that Scoop weakened the concrete mix on purpose, which bursts later on, despite the yellow guy knowing someone else did it, I get why Bob believes the contractor, cause yeah, Scoop's a badly written idiot still, but within this specific scenario, I comprehend why he would be suspected. Mega Machines felt like the writers were attempting to work around the reboot's shortcomings and create something effective within its strict framework. While these elements were more typical in something like Thomas, I believe the Bob reboot could have been more successful if it had prominently featured those bolder plots and tones with expanded ideas more in focus. As it stands, the majority of the episodes are tedious and uninspired, with only a few worthwhile episodes and some decent valuable lessons interspersed. It sucks that the good aspects went to waste, though I'd rather remember the good than the bad, you know? I get I'm talking about a show literally meant for 5-year-olds, but just because you're writing for that demographic doesn't mean you have to be super lazy. Though, there's more junk related to the show that's not in the actual show, so let's go head to head with things provided by the worst nightmare of Thomas fans, Mattel! Mattel shockingly did a ton of marketing and tie-in material to the reboot. Well, not really shockingly, because first of all, they turned down the wide range of toys because, you know, that's where the real money's made. Uh-oh.
What is up with the machines' faces in some of these toys? Especially these ones! Why do they look like that?
That's one of the flaws in these cheap-looking toys. The toy line launched by Mattel and Fisher-Price included a line of die-cast characters, a kinetic stand-focused line of mash and mold vehicles, a small brand of Mega Bloks building sets, plus talking and pullback machines. First things first, the diecast line that Mattel marketed the most looks pretty doofy in retrospect. Unsure if the barely painted, oddly proportioned toys came from the daunting task of working these intricate reboot designs into actual physical products, or the endless pit of 2014 to 15 Mattel's cost-cutting measures stemming from the 2012 oil crisis to the Disney Princess related stock losses, or even the shift to automated manufacturing using the 2-rivet rule on Hot Wheels and Thomas diecasts. Hold on, what was my original point again? Yeah, these things suck. Obviously, you got a bunch of the main cast representing their questionably charming glory, like, geez, why does Disney have monster truck tires? Is the tiny mixer gonna flatten some cars or something? To pad out the line, they had weird repaints and retools under different collections. The normal versions are under Classic Series, but then you have the weird themes like Hazard Series, Scrapyard Series, Icy Series, Logging Series, Blue Tech Series, and Concrete Series. Some of these designs do look interesting, but I feel like they missed an opportunity to not make designs based on things that actually happened. Cars and Thomas made variants of characters based on specific scenes, so why not make a dirty quarry Scoop with a sad face and then tie that to Mega Machines? Because I certainly don't think Scoop ever pretended to be Denji. I'm more baffled by the range having 0 playsets. They had a 2-ton transporter carrying case, not unlike the Mac ones from their Cars line, and a giant Scoop playset that definitely was meant to be Ace. But it feels like a waste they never made sets out of locations like Bob's Yard or any of the locations within Spring City or Fix'em.
The line packing in Bob with Dizzy while everyone else gets random cargo is a strange choice. They should have packed other human bodies in with the machines, like Leo and Wendy coming with Lofty and Muck, or Conrad coming with Ace.
The Mash and Mold toys didn't fare any better. I think it's a cool idea to give you Play Sand with Play-Doh inspired sets, considering the original Stake Along line did the same with packed in Play Sand cans. Still far from perfect. Vehicular proportions here are better, but the faces look gross. Rolly here looks like he knows I don't own an air fryer, And Scoop here looks like he wants to plow through a crowd of 50 pedestrians. Some of the other toys look alright, but they suffer from the same issues as the above. One interesting piece of Reboot merch is a very obscure collaboration with the Thomas and Friends Minis line. While some are familiar with the absurd crossover packs like those based on DC Comics, Ninja Turtles, SpongeBob, and Power Rangers, one I see never discussed is this construction team Toby, with Spring City approved bees across his wooden frame.
At the front, you can see the wooden tram carrying Bob riding shotgun. Considering that one Children in Maid video, I believe this is the second instance of Bob and Thomas characters appearing together.
Besides Mattel products, European toy maker Dicky also produced a toy line after Fisher-Price range was seemingly cancelled, which resulted in the unreleased status of some Mega Machines and Season 3 characters. Dicky Toys line appears more accurate in terms of proportions, sizing, and detail. However, the faces seem more lifeless compared to the actual CGI models. Like, look at Scoop! Bashing out of the toy aisle for a sec. There were tons of other promo material, one example being the official Reboot YouTube channel that still posts today, with a few recent uploads being classic Bob the Builder compilations. On it, you can check out a few episodes, clips, and music videos. To be honest, the music is pretty catchy. The main theme is pretty good, and an overall solid remix in the full version. Even though some already brought up how the TV edit has Bob and the gang have so much fun working together to get the job done, shortened to Bob and the team have so much fun and they get the job done.
So what's funny is how the Bob and the team lyric was originally Bob and the gang in the original show. What makes this hilarious is how I assume, knowing how since the 2000s the word gang is synonymous with the mafia or cartel, I assume this is why the new theme says Bob and the team. It makes me think that Bob and the gang are going to mug some hostages.
Oh my god. Bob the Builder is about terrorism.
When things go wrong is nice, but overall it's just a fancy summation reminding me of why I hate this show.
Scoop runs away with his imagination, so all his plans are half-baked.
Showtime!
Well, there's nothing better than digging, and I'm the best around.
Welcome to Bob's world.
Muck clears away all the mess that's made.
And work like Bob the Builder.
Raise your arms, I love thee, high up off the ground.
Aren't anything too great, but they're a catchy way to run down the main characters even though half of them are barely used. Feel the Force is the best song in the reboot without contest. Given Mega Machines did so much well, having an all-the-way fire rock theme in a freaking Bob the Builder special was unexpected. We Are a Team is very weird because it is a good song, but I start to get annoyed hearing that track after seeing every single episode use that darn song for every montage over and over again.
Constructing, digging, building, lifting, drilling, fixing, concrete, mixing, T-E-A-M, everybody clap.
Other misc material like the Meet the Team, Learning with Leo, or Siteworks shorts are neat novelties, I guess. Siteworks is more notable, as it's something the model series did before with their on-site specials. Funny considering Siteworks was meant to be called On-Site too, according to this piece of concept art. There were also a few live events like the one with intricately detailed 4D street art, another with a sand scoop sculpture, and a scattered amount of shopping mall meet and greets with a terrifying Bob costume. The reboot was also featured with Thomas the Tank Engine and Fireman Sam at the Mattel Play attractions in Liverpool and Dubai. Both featured another uncanny Bob mascot with a Wendy mascot present alongside the surprisingly good Muck, Dizzy, Tiny, and Scoop replicas. These attractions closed down around 2020 due to COVID, though part of me wants to own these cursed relics for my own amusement. Obviously, the series ended silently around 2018 after Season 3 wrapped up that year. Merchandise evidently wasn't distributed well. As if memory serves correct, Mattel got their Hot Wheels, Thomas and Cars stuff around the Philippines at the time, but not Bob the Builder. So, here's an amusing anecdote on my end, so take it as you will. During a summer vacation to the US of A in 2018, my family and I visited the Target store in New Jersey. and in an aisle surrounded and filled with unsold Mysticon stats. Don't ask why that, it just happened to be there too. A bucket load of unsold Bob Reboot merchandise was clustered around the pegs. While I can't recall precisely which toys remain, I believe I saw some variations of Lofty and 2-Ton. Later that same year I had the trip, the Reboot just crashed and burned off a cliff. After the new Bob the Builder imploded on itself like a misfired demolition, the legacy it left behind was really its most popular but not most prominent flaws in my opinion. Back when the redesigned Bob characters were built in October 2014, this started a majority of polarized reactions from people who grew up with the original Bob the Builder on social media. There were several old 2014 YouTube and Twitter posts complaining and rambling about Bob's design, and some of these reactions are very funny.
The development team must have thought, can we fix it? Well, obviously they f***ing can't, can they?
One comment I still remember the most is the one where someone said that Reboot Bob is the guy who drank Carling and voted UKIP. I'm not joking, someone legitimately tweeted this. During the facelift fiasco, Curtis Jobling, who was the man responsible for the iconic classic Bob the Builder designs, had this to say. Everywhere I go, Bob is still recognized. This shows he is still being loved by audiences to this day. For that, I am immensely proud. I am grateful that I got to work on him originally. It is quite clear, looking at the comments online and in the press, what people's take is on it. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Ironically, director, producer, and original Bob creator Keith Chapman did like the redesigns. According to this article, he had this to quote. When I saw the new look Thunderbirds, it was a bit of a shock about the puppets, but you have to move on. There will be some resistance to people seeing Bob like this, but it will maybe come from parents or guys in their early 20s who grew up with it. They'll remember it and perhaps will be thinking, oh god, what have they done to Bob? But of course, the audience now, the preschoolers, won't remember the older Bob. They will be seeing it fresh, so it will be interesting to see how it goes down. I have to applaud that moving creativity. It's good they feel they have the confidence in the brand, and he's so iconic and well known. Little that he knew, everybody terminally online from 2015 to 18 were livid.
Ever since then, the reboot is still talked about as being this terrible redesign of Bob the Builder, usually bunched with other bad reboots or terrible redesigns the internet loves to know and load. In one way or another, you got people within the Bob or Thomas adjacent vehicle show communities, like The Unlucky Tug, Thomas and Tugsman, Trevor Davis, or people outside those circles like Connor the Waffle, Phantom Strider, Cad Icarus, Vinny Vinesauce, and Veilskabum. The reboot, obviously, garnered bad publicity, namely with people complaining about how realistic or detailed or creepy the characters look, especially Bob. Ever since those 10 years when it started, it's still being talked about for those points alone. And the funniest thing about this whole ordeal is how the weirder side of the internet around DeviantArt reacted to it. Here's a game for you. Do you want to see characters from Angry Birds, Winx Club, or Lazy Town get pissed over a below average hunk of junk? If yes, then I suggest typing the words Bob the Builder Reboot into DeviantArt and dive right into the stinky phantoms.
Since last decade, DeviantArt has an infamous trend dubbed as fill-in memes. In a nutshell, these images depict fictional characters reacting to a thing the user who makes these memes likes or not. They have been criticized due to their poor quality and repetitiveness, which also shuns away the actual good art in sight.
The reputation of the Bob reboot around these circles is ridiculous because it's understandable why these folks hate it to an extent, especially after watching the whole show now. But the way they express their disdain to it is very hilarious. It mostly involves putting the reboot with other cartoons most here hate, likely because they saw a famous YouTuber crap on this with Teen Titans Go and All Engines Go. So these folks get various fictional characters to express how much they quote-unquote hate the Bob the Builder reboot. Never before you'll see Mordecai, the Powerpuff Girls, Ben Tennyson, Crafty Corn, Gru, Kim Possible, Squidward, and the Little Einsteins express their absolute hatred for this thing with clipped screenshots. It's either that, or low quality engagement bait posts about old characters from Bob getting pissed at the new versions to some degree. I'll just give you a montage of the funniest ones I can find, and I'll leave you to think about these for yourself. Me looking at all of these posts is fun to laugh at, so I highly recommend going on DeviantArt with friends to chuckle and laugh at this stuff, though visit with caution. Even though hating the reboot itself is valid, I think most bring up only the elements changed from the original and not like the pretty boring and bad episodes. Heck, I don't even see much discussion for the things the reboot did well. So I contacted a few Bob fans within the Thomas fandom to see what they thought about it now. I gave them a list of things to watch, so they can give opinions, regardless if they watched the original Bob the Builder or not.
Like Wack, I am also guilty of not watching much Bob the Builder whilst growing up. I was drawn to Thomas, Chuggington, Rory, Fireman Sam, but somehow not Bob. Apparently my parents did try to hook me up with the show, but little me showed no interest, according to them anyway. With that said, I'm familiar with the premise of the show and its main characters. Classic Bob had its simple, charismatic charm that didn't transition to the reboot, like, at all. I think of the Bob reboot as the big world era of Thomas, where it doesn't know what it wants it to be, a realistic show or a cartoony one, where the machines, at least design-wise, are more similar to their real-life counterparts, and as far as I've seen, there's a lot more physics and weight involved, only for that to be thrown away a season or two later. Similar to how the Big World era tried to cater to older and newer fans by giving rivet updates to the main cast in order to be more realistic, but then having cartoony physics with the engines jumping and bouncing around. A positive experience I've had with the reboot is with the Mega Machine special. I like how there was a pretty intense climax and a threatening human villain, which, as far as I'm aware, is a first for the franchise. Besides that, I think the Bob reboot as a whole has a very formulaic episode structure. Every episode feels the same, which makes the show very predictable. A character messes up, refuses to tell Bob, and because of that causes more trouble until it's all fixed via a dumb song montage. I don't know the general consensus for the song We Are a Team, but by the second episode watch, I was sick of it. It's annoying, overused, and just overall not a tuneful piece to listen to. I might offend a lot of people when I say this, but it feels like one of those AI songs you generate by slapping some lyrics into a prompt.
Well then, the Bob the Builder reboot was a thing, and where do I stand? Well, it exists, I guess, and it's fine, not bad, not terrible, but it wouldn't be something I'd watch again due to how much of a nothing burger it is. And it doesn't help from its repetitive nature in terms of its plots, other than a few rough in the diamonds here and there. But I will say, it's not all bad. The characters themselves, they're either good, okay, or they feel like NPCs, especially a handful of minor and secondary characters. Specifically a few of the human characters, but not all of them. The animation isn't that bad, both the human and vehicle characters are decently animated, and the colours have a nice and warm colour palette, and it's completely consistent throughout the beginning and the end of the series. And for a CGI animated series from 2015, this has aged decently in terms of its presentation to what was around at the times in terms of CGI kid shows that were just thrown together. Also, it looks miles better visually than CGI Fireman Sam, that video brain Quato looking motherfucker. Other than that, it looks great. Except for Season 3. I don't like it. And that's all I'm going to elaborate on. In terms of being the best of the worst in the reboot in general, is its only special Mega Machines. And it shows from fleshing out the characters more other than being one note, along with some new faces bringing something new to the table. A main villain that will stop at nothing to reach his goal and pretty much throwing his own lackeys under the bus to get what he wants, and it does have its stakes here and there, even if the pacing of the scenes in question feel oddly slow, but it could be me. But other than that, it's honestly the rough in the diamond of the reboot. But as a whole, the Bob the Builder reboot is not the worst reboot out there. Like, I've seen worse. But it could have been done better with what it has, cause it's just a repetitive mess with some good things here and there, and the only legacy that the reboot has left behind at this point is pretty much being the butt of jokes as to how not to do reboots. And the public isn't wrong, but who knows, in a different world where Mattel wasn't heavily strict with it, and left it to open its wings, it could have done better. It could have done better.
When I first heard this reboot was coming in, I was like, nah, it's fake. It's gotta be fake. I mean, Ready Steady Bill's still going, so nah, it's gotta be one of those fake fan arts. Then one day I saw it on PBS Kids and I was like, oh my god, it's real. Oh, this looks bad. Fine, I'll give it a try. What I didn't like most about it was just the vehicles. No, it wasn't their, like, realistic expressions. They just felt stiff. Like, oh my goodness. They didn't have any movement or any emotion whatsoever. The emoting was the worst. Like, even when they're happy, they're talking with frowns like, I'm so happy, with a big frowny face. And their lack of movement. They kind of moved with like Chuggington if they had like spring resistance. Even if they had the same names, they didn't have like the same kind of characteristics like the old models did. Like no Lassie twitching, none of Mike's eyes doing her little weird thing, none of Scoop going up and down. No, too stiff. The humans didn't bother me much. And the new machines? I wanted to like them, but I don't know, they just didn't hit me. Maybe no introduction episode. Or a lack of focus on them. Or weren't as well made as the Project Build It newbies. Like even the one-timers or even the not-so-appearing machines from Project Build It, they still felt like some characters with some personality and some depth. But these guys, nah. This reboot felt way too, like, stiff and boring for my liking. I thought, hey, maybe season 3 would be better. And it was. Especially for some characters like Lofty that fixed his character. And it had lots of bouncy movement, lots of more vibrant colors. Almost felt like a proper reboot. But, this hype was short-lived. Still the same formula stories that really put me off. Especially the last one was just, oh no, Scoops hit things and resolution and like, that was a finale? Nah, dude. If you want me to watch this little reboot with realistic machines, forget about it!
Hey there, I'm Elon. Let's go talk about Mega Machines the movie! I went back to a lot of the reboot for this, and I forgot how genuinely boring it was, except for season 3.
After a while, it's like the movie's Groundhog's Day. It's the same thing every day. You wake up in the morning and you say, I wonder what I'm gonna do today!
Then you got Mega Machines here just absolutely flooring me in how good it actually is. I think a lot of that comes down to both the scope and the writing for this one. And I don't just mean the whole dam and reservoir being the biggest build ever thing. Rather than just come off as a bigger episode, this movie actually feels pretty big. From the impressive camera work to how big the stakes actually feel this time around. Like, when things really do start to get going down, you actually feel it. That scene where the sirens start to wail and you cut back to Spring City and see all the citizens there, Jesus. And a lot of that is being away from the usual formula and just much better writing in general. Was kind of shocked to learn the writer for this was an outsider for both the reboot and this kind of format. Looking at his IMDb, he mostly does soaps and The Odd Kids Show, which kind of surprised me. Dude adapted to the whole feature-length DVD special for limited theatrical runs pretty easily, alongside writing the best possible versions of these takes on the characters and weaving so many great character arcs through this. And the best example of it is one of the penultimate scenes. Spoilers for Mega Machines up ahead. Sorry, but I really want to talk about this with the time I've got. The whole movie sets up Conrad as the perfect, irredeemable scumbag, spiteful and vindictive towards his rival, throwing his weight around and abusing his machines, and constantly forcing them with the threat of scrapping, even outright threatening them when they want to help go stop the flood. He even made me feel bad for Reboot Scoop! Reboot Scoop! All under a facade of being a friendly guy there to help him out. And then, as he's confident he's gotten away with it...
No! What did you say? Scoop didn't do anything. I messed up the concrete and he told me to do it.
The facade is broken. Conrad gets outed for what he truly is. The abuse and lies sustainable no longer. And the fact it circles back to an earlier subplot in the movie?
You two are nothing but bullies!
You know what, Conrad? You're nothing but a bully.
Oh, the buzz!
So yeah, I like Mega Machines a lot. Go watch Mega Machines.
And with the criticisms and praise given to this bloody show, what to do now? Alright, let's sort this mess out. With everything I and Jordie discussed, How would we reboot Bob the Builder ideally? How can we make the best ideas the reboot has function without angering people? So, say it with me now. Can we fix it?
Yes we can.
Number 1. Keep the aesthetic stylized, but add details if necessary. I think the redesign approach from the new Mario and Sonic movies could work. Adding extra detail for distinction, but keeping the designs just cartoony enough to avoid the uncanny valley. Like, that's exactly why movie Sonic had to be redesigned at the 11th hour. Keep the bead eyes and grill mouths if required, but I think this balance is more appealing and true to the OG. Like, I tried doing some tests with the main Can-Do crew, old and new, and here I tried my best to keep some aspects of both. However, I tried keeping as much of the original stylization as possible. Number 2. Keep old characters similar, but give new characters attention.
Not every episode has to focus on any of the already existing characters that the original incarnation established, so give some new machines some time to shine, especially the Stretch, Tread, Alfred, Shifter, etc. The model era, especially in Project Build It, frequently highlighted more of the side characters like Scrambler or Flex, so I think the reboot should follow suit.
Number 3. Add more story variety, but also play with what's now possible in CGI. Don't have every single episode follow a strict set of characters or framework. Instead, try playing more with available locations and characters to make a story that isn't just X breaks up all the time. Have more episodes about other machines or humans. Play around with the new characters brought in, as well as story dynamics with the older characters. Try seeing what new places and tones you can bring into the existing cast, like what Mega Machines did. Number 4. Don't be afraid to return older faces.
Like Wax said earlier, the Brenner era of Thomas did it, so I don't know why the Bob reboot didn't. You don't have to bring back every old character, but bring back some of the notable ones like Travis, Benny, maybe Skip and Trix. And if we're talking about the humans, I would have loved to see either Mr. Beasley or Mrs. Sabatini having a return.
Number 5. Make the merchandise appealing and take advantage of it. While not necessarily part of the show itself, it's a vital part of the reboot that needs mending too. I think Mattel gave this line the Hot Wheels or Matchbox treatment of making solid plastic wraps of marketable locations with gimmicks and play patterns thrown in with solid and decent diecast. Perhaps it would have sold better. Other than the more on-model diecast in 164 or 155 scale, I think making actual playsets of show locations would guarantee more attention to the show, like how Thomas usually has sets of core locations like Tidmouth or Knapford. So it's no brainer this other hit entertainment kids show needs extra entertainment for the kiddos bashing these things around. And that should pretty much wrap our discussion for this reboot. Though, I'd like to give some concluding statements first before the sun sets. Despite young me not being as into Bob the Builder as a kid, as I was with Thomas, I think this reboot is unironically the most interesting thing I found in the entire Build the Bobder franchise, or at least in terms of how I remember Bob the Builder. While Jordie and I expressed that Bob lost relevance in the 2010s, this reboot did bring relevance back, albeit not very good relevance. Given old Bob barely has relevance now, especially halfway through the 2020s, I feel the reboot has more relevance today than the OG in the internet space, as I keep seeing folks mention the reboot to poke fun of. Reboot Bob's perception then and now, combined with the questionable changes, decent additions, and jumbled marketing, always felt like an enigma to me. Even years before making this video, it baffles me how something that tried to put Bob back on the map did its job of making him in the map again, but not in the way Keith, Hit, and Mattel hoped. I could see why Keith Chapman defended the reboot a decade ago. As he stated with his claim, kids will grow up with the new series first. Admittedly, I grew up with the 2000s Transformers movies and cartoons without seeing the older G1 or Beast Wars stuff first. Like, there will always be some successful franchise version for each generation, with its fans for them to enjoy and to eventually find the older material later on. Keith has a point that kids will likely latch onto the reboot first, but I think the difference between the more successful franchise reboots and this one and several other bad ones is simple. It's just not good on its own right. Even when you know little about Bob the Builder like I do, I don't think one had to know the OG Bob to possibly enjoy this. Heck, I doubt the art style change affected how I feel about the biggest issue with it. Ultimately, I believe good adaptations can succeed whether you're familiar with the source material or not. I never cared for something like League of Legends, personally, but the TV adaptation, Arcane, managed to be pretty sad, heartfelt, and enjoyable without myself knowing the changes or differences from the game. Same could be said about the 2008 live-action Speed Racer movie. Even if the adaptation swapped the grounded 1960s world for a crazy future fantasy utopia, the movie still felt very strong on its own despite me barely watching the original. It still told a good story about the importance of family versus the corrupted corporate industry that didn't need you to know the 60s anime to comprehend. But with the Bob the Builder reboot, what did I even receive that was fully good, judging this by its own merits? By the end of the rewatch, I started to feel this reboot failed through and through. Not just because it's a bad reboot, but because it's just a bad, boring, mediocre, and monotonous, poorly written waste of time. The reboot's over-discussed redesigns and animation are dubious, but my final, less discussed verdict is that the reboot was as inconsistent as the rickety shack made of weak and sturdy planks of balsa wood. The animation was generally well done, but the backgrounds and redesign quality were lacking. The writing had strong points in its construction themes and morals, contributing to one of the better Bob the Builder specials, but it faltered from the routine format and storylines. Most new characters are good, but the older characters are either sidelined or portrayed as ridiculously stupid. There clearly was some vision behind the jumbled mess, but it just wasn't assembled properly. By all means, it ain't the worst reboot known to man. There are worse reimaginings of animated properties handled far worse than this. Calling it one of the worst cartoons ever made like some DeviantArt folks do is an exaggeration, cause there are genuinely worse from both a writing and visual perspective. Look, I might get shot by 50 Thomas fans for this, but that blue tank engine got the superior bad reboot. At least on its own, no matter how ridiculous or unfaithful All Engines Go is to Thomas and friends. With that, I can enjoy and finish episodes without it putting me to The stupid bouncy train show is serviceably okay. Not super great or peak, mind you, but it's at least alright. AEG is entertaining, dumb, and kinda charming, while on the other hand, Bob isn't that. Sure, there are tons of good additions made to Bob the Builder, but those are all drowned out by this confusing mess crowding it. Yeah, both shows are hated by old fans, but I can at least see why someone would like All Engines Go. This reboot is just a baffling mess with promising ideas hampered by ridiculously poor execution. And even after talking about this mess for forever, it at least ain't the worst talking machine show Keith Chapman developed, but I've already expressed my detailed thoughts on that at length prior.
Overall, the 2015 revival was the weakest way to bring back Bob for the newer generation, and how it performed with merchandise at the time was absolutely appalling. In spite of its flaws, I do think there were generally good ideas in this show to bring Bob to a new modern audience. If Keith and the people at Mattel or HIT had been given more time to develop the reboot to be a better concept, then maybe I would have given it more the benefit of the doubt. But it is what it is.
My final words? Just watch Mega Machines if you want a solid Bob the Builder reboot experience. It's the best thing this has to offer, really, and I think it sums up everything that could have been good. I genuinely hope the people behind the upcoming Bob movie with Anthony Ramos do a better job. I don't think it necessarily will be good, but I think it's too early to judge, to say it's bad. Likewise, a few mainstream movies based off old kids properties with star-studded casts usually turn people off at first but then turn out alright or are, pretty good. So, who's to say? With about time to bid farewell to Spring City, I'd like to thank Jordie Porgie of the Bob the Builder wiki for helping me out with my video. I recommend checking out the site for yourself. Plus, his various socials will be linked down below, so you can check out his stuff.
And I'd like to thank Wack for letting me help with this video. I had a blast ripping and complimenting this weird show, and I hope this video gives more constructive insight in this reboot.
Shout out to LJ Productions, the Milan Toon channel, Solar Life, and Tank Dankencam for being kind enough to send their testimonies to the reception segment. They're awesome content creators with entertaining loads of videos and pages to check out for yourself. As is usual, this has been Wax World. Like, comment, ring, and subscribe, and most importantly of all, stay wacky!
Go,